Welcome to Enlightened, the enlightened journey of life. I am your host, Jen Hamilton, and it is an honor to have you here. I am a conscious life coach and women's empowerment mentor, and I activate a potent level of self and soul inquiry with my clients, which initiates deep and lasting transformation in all areas of their lives. I am here for the full human experience, authentically and audaciously sharing my magic with the world. On this podcast, we're all about mastering life on the way to enlightenment. And as we are here having a human experience, we might as well embrace it all. We play in the space of what is real and tangible, just as much as we play in the space of esoteric and metaphysical. You'll be ignited by deep conversation, whether through my own personal musings, interviews with incredible thought leaders around the world, and everyday divine humans sharing their soulful stories. Thank you for being on this journey. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enlightened Podcast. I am your host, Jen, and today my special guest is Jamie Blanco. Jamie is an award-winning radio news producer residing in the Boston area. Jamie spent several years working to realize her father's dream of publishing his book of hope for cancer patients. Jamie enjoys nerd culture, hosts an iHeartRadio podcast called The Hub on Hollywood, and is now a frequent background actor in film and television. This incredible woman has written a book, Hope for the Hopeless, in her father's honor. And it was absolutely amazing to be able to have her on the show and chat to her. And I'm so excited for you to hear all of the magic that she brings to the world. So without further ado, let's dive in. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me on the Enlightened Podcast. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So we were just chatting a little bit about how it's yesterday where I am here, and you're in the future, and I'm in the past, and it's snowing here, and it's just wonderful weather where you are. So it's fascinating. It's wonderful. I'm so excited to be joining you right now and chatting.
We were just saying off air, like how cool it is that we can, connect via this magical thing called the internet, with microphones and screens and cameras. And yeah,
Mhm.
you're in Boston and it's the middle of winter for you at the moment because I'm in Australia. It's the middle of summer. Tell us what Boston is like. It sounds like it's freezing if it's snowing.
Yeah, well, we just had a snowstorm today, and it's a winter wonderland. I mean, it's just beautiful. I live on the top of a hill in a valley. It's called the Pleasant Valley, and it's just super picturesque right now. I got to go outside and play with my kids. I'm sure the people who have to drive and commute are not as, I don't think it's as beautiful as I think it is today, but it's really nice. So I appreciate the changing seasons because I grew up in Florida, where we had no seasons. It was just 80 degrees every single day. So it's still a little bit magical for me.
That's amazing. It's so funny because I talk to people overseas all the time and they talk about the snow and I'm like, I've never been to the snow. I've never properly seen
No?
snow. No, I'm in Queensland in Australia, so it doesn't snow here. In the southern states it does, but I've
Yeah.
driven through snow when I was a little girl, but it wasn't like proper snow. It was just like kind of like white bits of stuff falling from the sky. It wasn't the proper stuff. So
Well, you're more than welcome to visit. We've got plenty of it. You can have
amazing.
some.
I will get over there at some stage. I've made so many friends around the world just having conversations. So it's amazing. Boston is definitely on my list. I've had a client over there. I've had other
Hmm.
people that I know in my circle over there. So it sounds like a really, really beautiful place. I can't wait to visit.
It's a lot of history, very walkable, beautiful city. Let me know when you're by. We'll have
I
you.
absolutely will. I absolutely will. Now, Jamie, you're the author of an incredible book, Hope for the Hopeless. Tell us about what does this book represent for you? What is it about and how did it all come about for you?
Sure. So this book, Hope for the Hopeless, is something that my father started writing when I was a child, and he was battling brain cancer. So he was 36 years old, father of three, relatively healthy. He'd never had a major health crisis or anything like that. when he got this horrible diagnosis. He was driving to work one day in his van and had a seizure behind the wheel of his van on the way to the hospital where he worked. And they wheeled him into the ER. They found the tumor, and suddenly, it went from he's at the peak of his life to he's fighting for his life, right? So 36 years old, the same age that I am now, when he started to battle this tumor. And, just to make a quick synopsis, he was given 3 months to live. He was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, multiforme, grade 4, the most aggressive, deadly kind of cancer, a brain tumor. And this was in 1995 when this happened. I was 9 years old when he got sick. He was given no hope for survival. They said, you'll be dead in 3 months, maybe a couple weeks longer if you do chemo and radiation. So there was no options given to him, right? There were no mainstream treatments. There were no clinical trials. There was nothing that was going to give him a chance at survival. And that all sort of led him on this path to self-treatment where he's like, all right, well, you want me to die? I'm not ready. I'm not going that route. My dad was a very rough and tumble New Jersey street guy. He was a tough guy, and he wasn't going to take, this bullshit. He wasn't like, no, screw that. I've got shit to live for. Sorry. I love that I can curse on this podcast, by the
Yes,
way.
go for
So
it.
because it's way more true to who he was. I
Yeah.
feel like, so I love that. He had too much to live for, and he started to educate himself about holistic medicine and holistic treatments and natural medicines. And not only did he completely transform his diet, um, to a far more healthful one. He had never eaten a carrot in his life. I know you were talking about how much you hate bananas. He had never eaten a carrot in his life. He didn't eat veggies or, hardly any fruit, very meat and potatoes kind of guy. Um, so he started getting all of these healthy, wonderful things into his diet. He started taking supplements. Um, and he was reading books. He was going to speaking events with authors and nutritionists. He was going to people's homes. He was doing everything in his power to educate himself on how to help heal his body on his own. Because remember, this is 1995. There was no internet. There was no way to communicate the way that we do now, or that,
Course, yeah.
right, that abundance of information. He also relied on visualization, meditation, hypnosis, those power of the mind things, and his tremendous faith in God. So, in every way that he could, he was attacking this disease and trying to transform himself, mind, body, and soul, to find the cure. And he had that faith, and he had that mental focus and power to empower himself and his body and his immune system and his soul to to find that healing, right? So he was given 3 months to live. He lived 8 years, eight
Wow.
incredible years with no mainstream medical treatment. He never did chemo, he never did radiation, no clinical trials. The only interventions he ever had were surgeries. So this is not to say that he was cured, but something about what he was doing was slowing the progression of this disease. So a tumor, an aggressive tumor that normally would recur within a matter of weeks, was taking years before there was any recurrence. And then they were able to catch it, remove it, and then he would go another few years of relative good health. Um, and it's amazing because he was the healthiest he had ever been while fighting this deadly disease. And he started to write all this down, right? He started to write down all of the things that he was doing for himself, about his experiences and his battles with the medical community and with the doctors. Um, and he started documenting it all. The other caveat being that, okay, my father most likely was dyslexic and had a lot of trouble reading and writing, but despite that, he was typing away day after day, writing as much as he could. and documenting as much as he could about what he was doing for himself. And I was a kid at the time. I I wasn't much of an editor back then. I wasn't much of a writer back then, but I got to see his tremendous perseverance, and so I always knew the book existed, right? I always knew that he was writing these things down and that it existed somewhere. But unfortunately, when he did pass eventually in 2003, um, I was 17 at that time, getting ready to go away to college, helping my mom with my two younger brothers. There wasn't a lot that I could do then with what he had written, but I knew it existed. Always in the back of my mind, always in the back of my mind. So I went away to school. That's when I moved from Florida to Boston. Went to Emerson College. I got my degree. I learned journalism is what I studied in, broadcast journalism, got into my field, eventually made my way to Washington, D.C., where I was a big shot producer for CBS Radio, had my little socialite life. I did all the things I wanted to do. And when I started having my children about 7, 8 years ago, I finally had the time, I think, and the skills to to start maybe putting something together, right? I remembered that this book existed. That's about when my mother found it. And if you have a moment, I wanted to show you what she found because it's
Yeah.
incredible. She found, I'll be right back,
Yeah.
this giant leather bound portfolio
Wow.
case with all this water damage, right? Because it was in a shed in our backyard in Florida for who knows how many years. And we have hurricanes, we had flooding. It survived all kinds of things out there. And inside were hundreds of pages of his original writing. You see, that
Wow.
says Hope for the Hopeless, and his original writing and research, just hundreds and hundreds of, physical pages that survived in this thing, which I think is, first miracle right there. Um, and my mother gave it to me. And, the second she handed it to me, I knew exactly what I needed to do.
Yeah.
I knew that I was not going to rest until his story was out there because it was something extraordinary. It wasn't normal. There's no reason that he should have been alive. And every doctor that I spoke to, that's the word that they use. They use the word miracle. But the point that he makes is, why does it need to be a miracle? Why does it need to be this one-off thing? What was it about what he was doing for himself that was slowing the progression of this disease and helping him to survive as long as he did? So that's where my journalism skills came into play. Not only did I edit his admittedly horrible grammar, terrible grammar. It was so frustrating. I'm like, I remember like typing next to my husband. I'm like, what in the world is why? Like, just it was bad. But we cleaned it up. I knew what he was trying to say. It was just bad spelling and grammar, but we cleaned it up. But the next part was, investigating all of the aspects that I believe helped him in his longevity. And I get to do these incredible interviews with experts, with naturopathic oncologists and nutritionists and motivational speakers and spiritualists and and doctors. And that was the fun part for me, and being able to put all of those interviews together at the end of this book so that you can have the news you can use. Right? You've got this very compelling narrative, and you've got the functional piece that can help anyone who's facing a health crisis today, or anyone who just wants to prevent illness as well. So I spent 5 years putting this together. I spent the first 2 years was cleaning up what my father had written, and the remainder of that was writing my piece. But what's fascinating is the part where it comes to the mental focus. That was so cool, like learning about the power of the mind. But it also, helped me overcome a lot of grief that I didn't know that I was still holding on to. And so that was kind of like the hardest part. That's why it took a little bit longer, was because I admittedly had a couple of, mental breakdowns, emotional breakdowns putting this together. Um, but I didn't, I needed it to exist. I wanted it to exist. I wasn't going to stop until this story exists, because I really feel that it can help, it can help people out there. So, just this past year, back in June 2022, it was finally published and is now available for anyone to read.
Wow, that's such an incredible story. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. Is there anything in particular, any treatment in particular that your father went through that you attribute, to his health? Was there one thing in particular that stood out? Was it working with a spiritual healer, or, the
Mhm.
nutrition factor, or do you think it was a completely
Sure.
holistic thing?
I feel like there was no smoking gun in particular. I think it was everything that he was doing together. It was everything that he was doing all combined with each other. Although the one thing that he attributed probably most to his longevity and to his healing, was a supplement that he was taking called shark cartilage. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding shark cartilage. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it.
I haven't, no.
Okay. So the way that shark cartilage
Is it
purports to,
legitimate? Like, is it like literally shark cartilage?
it is literally shark cartilage, right, from a shark, and they sort of dry it out and they take the cartilage and they break it down into a powder. And back in the 90s, this was like the big thing that it was very popular back then. There was the doctor who helped develop it, Dr. William Lane. He had a successful medical trial in Cuba of 28 patients, in which he saw an um, almost 100% of his patients reported some kind of benefit from it, but many of them way outpaced their life expectancies. They saw tumor reductions, longer life expectancies. Um, what is controversial about it, though, is that those clinical trials were not peer reviewed. It wasn't done by certain standards. Um, but regardless, shark cartilage became very popular in the 90s. And the way that it supposedly works is the inhibition of angiogenesis, that it prevents new blood vessels from growing and feeding the tumors, and it attacks those blood vessels so that the tumors, essentially die or do not grow. It was that supplement in particular that he credited with most in slowing down the growth of his tumors. But again, it was very controversial. There were many clinical trials done with shark cartilage, none were conclusive. However, none of the clinical trials, at least in the United States, I'm not sure about everywhere in the world, but none of the clinical trials were done in the way that he and many other people used shark cartilage, right? Without chemo, without radiation, and using it early in the treatment cycle, like right after diagnosis. None of the clinical trials did that. Every clinical trial was in conjunction with chemo and radiation, and also late stage patients that were on death's door already.
Mhm.
So it's frustrating that despite not having any clinical trials done in the way that he and many people were using it, that the federal government here in the United States shut down the production of shark cartilage and shut down William Lane's company, because he refused to remove claims about its cancer benefits from its labels. So it feels like it
Mm.
was a very political thing versus whether it was actually beneficial or not. So that's the frustrating part, because nowadays, if somebody would like to go ahead and try shark cartilage for themselves, it would be very difficult to find it in the purity, and powder form that my father used back then. That part is frustrating. But I also don't personally believe, after everything that I have examined, that that's the only thing that helped him. Or
Mhm.
I feel like it was absolutely everything else in conjunction with that, and the nutrition, um,
Mm.
the mental focus and the faith. He was setting up his mindset in a way that primed him to receive that miracle, to receive that transformation, to empower his body to make the changes. And it's so cool the research that I got to do about the power of the mind. That can I wanted to read a couple of quotes to you if that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think this was, I think by far the funnest part that I got to research and talk about in the book. Um, okay, so there's Dr. Clifford Lazarus, who's highly respected, writes in Psychology Today. Visualization and imagery techniques are not medically recognized as first-line treatments for cancers or most serious diseases, but as adjunctive therapies, they can be very helpful. Indeed, I'm very fond of saying the mind and the body are different sides of the same coin, and they intersect most strongly at the level of imagination. And if you think about it, um, we have back in the day, back in the 90s, 80s, 70s, prior to maybe the 2000s and 2010s, it wasn't even medically accepted that your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions could impact the health of your body. Now we know that stress hormones and things like that that are triggered by your emotions and your mindset can have very damaging effects and inflammatory effects on the body, which can lead to all kinds of disorders and diseases, including cancer. Um, but when it comes to positive emotions and the neuropeptides that come as a result of those positive emotions and positive feelings, and those have very beneficial and anti-inflammatory effects on the body. So it is more than feasible to think that by having that positive mindset and focusing your imagination in ways to attack disease in your body, that they can have a positive effect. So visualization and at times hypnosis were very big parts of what he used to do. He used to visualize I'm
Visualize.
losing it. There we go. His tumor, and then like zapping it, and he would spend time every single day, closing his eyes, getting into a meditative state, and doing that for himself. And I think that can also play in very closely with faith. People who have a very, very strong faith, the way that he did, where it was not even a month. It was 3 weeks after his first surgery and diagnosis that he went before our church and he gave a speech and he said, God's going to heal me. And I'm going to prove everyone wrong. I'm going to prove all of the doctors wrong and you will see. And that's what happened, and whether you are a religious person or not, I think it all comes down to that the power of accepting that and believing it with such a ferocity and power that it affects that change. I think that we are extraordinarily powerful people, and beings, extraordinarily powerful beings, mind, body, and soul. We're not just, what this physicality, what that you see on the surface, and that's just fascinating to me. And I want to help people find that power within themselves and empower themselves to change their reality, change their health, change whatever they want to change because you can. You have that tremendous power. And I know you talk to a lot of people who, are focused on hypnosis and visualization. Like I wonder if you've seen that pattern as well.
Oh, I have, absolutely. And I'm a huge fan of the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. Actually, first discovered him when I was learning more about quantum science and quantum physics. And it was absolutely mind blowing. Some like knowing that he healed himself of this back injury and now goes on to support so many people to heal themselves. I mean, I've sort of been playing in this space for, gosh, a very long time, years and years and years and years and years. And every time, like it fascinates me, but I'm also at a point where it doesn't surprise me anymore because I'm like, that's the way it is. And funnily enough, I was driving home this morning from the Gold Coast, and I've just started listening to
Hmm.
the Neville Goddard collection. And so there's 10 books
by him. And at first, because I've done a lot of work around sort of unraveling religion for myself, and then being able to create a relationship with spirituality and just really defining what each of those are for me. And it's interesting because I've done so much work around just the acceptance of, God, and some of the things that have been in scripture, which I highly rejected at a point in my life because I was highly rejecting what religion was teaching me through the Catholic Church. And it's interesting because I can listen to something like Neville Goddard, and I can really relate to what he says, because in the first book in this collection of 10 of them, which is available on Audible, he talks about the fact that everything in the Bible is it's metaphorical, essentially. And so that, he relates God as such to your consciousness,
Mm,
so your awareness itself. And it was so interesting the way everything just slotted in completely with what, the Bible teaches, that it wasn't necessarily, a recount of, literal things that happened, but the things that were said and done, through the scriptures, how it actually relates to self, how it's all metaphorical and metaphysical. And it was absolutely mind blowing. And now that I'm starting to put the feelers out and I can listen now to things that talk about God and not have a full blown aversion to it, it
mm,
makes so much sense. When I started studying hypnosis and, NLP, like, I was just fascinated by what we could do in our mind, knowing in my own personal journey what I was able to create, both, positive and negative experiences. As not that there is, I don't love using the terms positive and negative, only because we give it a charge where it becomes safe or unsafe. So positive is safe, unsafe is
mhm,
negative. And so, just, to have the full blown, the full spectrum of human emotions, feelings, and experiences through my journey, I realized I was creating a lot of it. And even the quite unsavory pieces of it, I was creating all of those. And I was like, hang on a second, if I can create this to happen, what can I create that's going to serve me in a better way? And then
mm,
through my journey of, self-inquiry, self-awareness, self-discovery, doing my own inner work, I started to realize the power of my mind is literally affecting everything. And listening to stories, like yours, through your dad's experience, listening to so many other, like, whether it's a podcast or a book, or people that I talk to for other podcast episodes, or friends, we're all onto something here. But the thing
mm,
is, like, the old paradigm says I have to see it to believe it. The new paradigm that we're choosing to step into is I have to believe it to see it. And it literally comes down to the fact that when we have that awareness and that, that level of consciousness to understand that everything that I am being, saying, thinking, and feeling is going to project into my reality.
mm.
However, we also have the human experience of time, where we can't control time either. So time doesn't exist the way it does in the 3D world, in what we call the quantum world, which is where, the realm of possibilities, where all things, on all timelines exist all at once. And, just listening to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's helped so many people heal themselves literally through the power of belief. And so I wanted to ask you, Jamie, like, with your dad, did he at any point accept the diagnosis that he received, or did he just completely reject it from the beginning? And do you think perhaps that is what got him through? I'm so curious about that.
Um, well, that's a good question. I feel like he was very hopeful that it wasn't an accurate diagnosis. And when he started to live, blow past his life expectancy, the doctors started saying, oh, well, you must have been misdiagnosed. You must have misdiagnosed, right? But then he went and he had his samples retested over and over and over. He had his samples tested 6, 7 times. And it came back the same every single time. Glioblastoma, multiforme, grade 4, this terrible tumor. So I feel, he eventually had to accept what it was. but I don't think he ever focused on it.
Mm.
I don't think it was the I don't think he obsessed over it. I don't think that it was what was on his mind. I think what he was focused on was healing. What he was focused on were his conversations with God, where his, where was his learning journey and who to reach out to next. Um, I think that when you get that kind of a diagnosis, it's very easy to get sucked down and to it's the only thing that's trapped in your mind. But I think that when he started to live, and not only live, but to be, the healthiest he had ever been up until that point, he was just filled with this positivity, um, that kept him going in this light, and that's where he tried to stay. That is not to say that this was an easy journey, or linear. Every time that the tumors recurred, it was a step back and it was a blow. And every surgery that he had to do had a physical toll on his body and on his mind. And I think, what's been a struggle for me after the fact, has been sort of trying to separate, you know, my father and who he was from what the sickness eventually was, towards the end. And that can be very difficult, um, for a lot of people. But you know what? We all have to go home at the end of this life. This life is
Mm.
not forever. And, I feel like we need to radically accept that, and that there are things that happen with the body that are not necessarily who you are and who your deeper consciousness is. Um, and in the years since, my father passed, I've had to do a lot of work on my own trauma, my own anxieties, a lot of which has been very recent. Uh, going to the therapist, and doing that internal work on my own, and doing the research to to try to get myself in a better headspace, right? And it's not always easy. It's definitely not always a linear path. um I would just like to say that these things are messy, and what I like to say is that miracles are real, but miracles are messy. And life is messy, and being a human being is messy because we are in this physical world. But that doesn't mean that it is any less amazing, that you are any less powerful. It's just at some point we make that transformation, you know, to spirit. We make that transformation out of this world. And accepting that is more difficult.
Mm. Yeah. I'm really curious as well. Do you know what your father's relationship with like life and ultimately death was before the diagnosis? And did that shift after he was diagnosed?
My father was always a man of very deep faith. I think even before he got sick, he would have his regular conversations with God. They only just got more frequent after that. He would go down to the beach, and spend the day there. He would go to the church. And he didn't go to just any one church. He went anywhere he was invited to, or he would try them, and he would take us. And one of his favorite places was the Catholic church that was near our house, but we weren't necessarily Catholic. I went to a Church of Christ Christian school, so any denomination, we sort of were exposed to um, a lot of that. As far as whether his perception changed, I don't think so. I think it only got solidified. I think it only got stronger, so that everything that he believed up until that point, and he was a very spiritual person, and his father, my grandfather, was also a very spiritual person. So there was this, connectivity with spirit, and my grandfather would tell us stories about, talking to his guardian angel, and things like that. So I think he was very, deeply in that space, like in that space of faith, in spirituality, though not necessarily religious or religious dogma. Um, but what he talks about in the book is that when he got his diagnosis, he felt like he went into the medical profession. He became a respiratory therapist because he wanted to help people, because he always felt like he had a great mission in life. But after 10 years of being a respiratory therapist, he felt like he wasn't really making the change that he wanted to in the world. And he saw a lot of terrible things happen in the hospital. But when he got his diagnosis, he felt like his purpose was finally revealed. He felt that that's what he was supposed to be doing, that his job was to be here and to be sick and to overcome that illness and to prove that there was more to life than what the doctors say. That became his purpose. That was his greater purpose in life. So that became very quickly solidified for him, and helped him set that mindset.
And I mean, look at the legacy now as well. Like, it's moving through you. It's now moving through the book. It's moving through the airways, having these conversations. It's literally having an impact on so many people's lives. And what an incredible gift that that diagnosis was for him, to be able to have that impact on so many people.
Right. And I think a lot of people wouldn't see it as a gift. They're like, "Well, but he got sick, but he eventually died." But what he did for himself and the way that he lived, and, the way that what he wrote and what he has to share, and by extension, what I have to share, not only about his journey, but my journey as well as the child of a sick parent. Um, I think it was all meant to be, and it's going to have a wider impact. I hope. That's the goal, is to help whoever it might be able to, right? Whoever needs to hear that message of hope, of inspiration, of information. What I've also put together at the back of this book is a collection of resources, for anyone facing a cancer diagnosis, and all of the recommended reading. Another good one is The Biology of Belief. Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter, and Miracles by Bruce Lipton. That's a great
Mhm.
one. But all the recommended reading, that influenced him, that influenced me, that can help anyone today, nutrition, mind, body, and soul, and all of the practical resources are not only in the back of this book, but they're available for free on my website, hopeforthehopelessbook.com. I'm always updating it. So in that way, we can continue to try to help as many people as possible.
It's so incredible what you're doing. I'm just, it's a beautiful thing to just be able to talk to you about this and for you to bring all of this forward. There's one thing I want to circle back to, and because you mentioned, there was so much of the holistic things that he did. He went through the supplements, he went through, the nutritional avenues, certain diets. It sounds
Hmm.
like he did all of these things. I'm a huge advocate for these things. So 100%, we are so blessed in the day and age that we're in to have, the medical and pharmaceutical options available for when we need them. We've got incredible healthcare systems. We've got incredible surgeons out there, and absolutely it has a time and a place for all things. And it's not always the be all and end all as well. There are these other things out there. And I think this is, we need to start looking at these things in our lives because, the diets, the supplements, the nutrition, the different therapies that we can have, the talk therapy, so we can shift, energetic things. All of that's going to, in my personal belief and my experience, all that that's going to do is help us bring that deeper level of awareness, which is where we can tap into our, our consciousness or God, whatever, if that's, what you jam with, but if it's bringing us home to ourselves, to have that understanding, like if it's the diet and the clean water and the supplements, if it's something that helps us clear energy or toxicity within our body to be able to get that out of our system, so we do feel clearer to be able to connect with ourselves, to be able to connect with God or our faith or whatever that looks like. I think it's so important to embody all of those things and experience all parts of the holistic way of being. It can be in addition to medical as well. It's not necessarily one or the other. It's absolutely complementary. And it sounds like, this is something that, your father was advocating for, that it did include all of these other ways and things to try,
Mm,
because there's so many incredible modalities out there that, there's so much science in medical and pharmaceutical, but it also has a ceiling as well, as you would know. Like, if the doctors have given him a diagnosis and a prognosis that says, hey, you've got 3 months to live, and all these other things supported him, and it was an inwards journey. He worked with the power of the mind, which, when we start to understand the power of the mind, when we start to understand how the subconscious mind works, we can literally recreate our experience of life. And it's going to be with the support of the food that we put into our
mm,
bodies. The cleaner the food, like, you eat alive things, you feel alive. You eat something dead or from a packet, that's exactly what you're going to
right.
experience. We're always living things. All you have to do is look at the like a YouTube clip of the work of Dr. Emoto and what he does with the cells of
With
water.
water.
Speaking,
Yes, that
yeah,
was amazing.
yeah, it's incredible. And when we realize that, we're 70 to 80% water, you can't not believe in the fact that, it has an effect on our cells and our system. Like, when you start to really understand, how
Completely.
we're made up, and that we're energetic beings as well. We are all energy, and there's different frequencies. Like, when it comes to diet, like, food is a frequency. If you
Mm,
want to be on a certain frequency, then connect with the food that keeps you in that frequency. It's the same as music. I'm sure
mm,
you've had the experience of listening to a piece of music and you're like, oh my God, it's just speaking to
mm,
my soul, like, it's just moving through me. And it's because
mm,
it is a frequency. I see music as a consciousness. I see it as almost like an entity, that you can dance
mm,
with, you know and it's when you're open and clear and receptive to these things that you have the opportunity to go inwards and say, hang on a second, I'm not just going to live my life based on this doctor's prognosis.
mm.
I'm going to take matters into my own hand. I'm
Yes.
not rejecting the fact that I have this diagnosis, but I'm not accepting that
Yeah.
this is my fate straight away.
I think that's so cool that you're talking about, right, the energy of living things, and how that we kind of all relate to that. One of the things that my dad was really had expressed to me a lot was the power of flowers and the energy that flowers have. And so his favorite were white roses, because he would tell us that that had the most spiritual light, that white roses and white flowers had the most spiritual light, and that every flower had its own frequency and had its own energy to give. And so he was very insistent that he only wanted white flowers, and especially, after he passed, that he only wanted white flowers around us, and that was really great. But he loves flowers. And I think that you're right. Yes, food has energy. All of those living things have energy. And another thing that he believed was everything that we need to heal, everything that we need to live a good and healthful and successful life in this lifetime is here on earth, is provided, is on this planet, is all around us. Um, so when you have toxic treatments, let's say, so chemo and radiation, yes, they help with certain diagnoses, certain cancers, but there is a cost to that. The longest living pediatric glioblastoma patient, he received an experimental mixture of chemotherapies that did r- um, did prevent the tumor from returning, right? His glioblastoma after it had been removed with clean margins. But as a result of that, he developed other cancers later in life. And that's what happens a lot of the times. And there are some people who die as a result of chemo and radiation, of various other treatments because of the toxicity of it. It's like you're killing the good cells, but you're killing the tumor, but you're also killing the good cells along
Killing
with it.
everything off. Yeah.
Um, and that's why I think the holistic approach is so important. And I wish there was more of that, like in primary care. I'm not sure how it is in Australia and other parts of the world, but in the American medical system, it's you just throw drugs at the problem, and there's no real consideration for, well, what are you eating?
It's
What do
over
you?
here. It's just as bad.
Hmm.
It's fucked. In fact, like my ex father-in-law was going through cancer treatment about 10 years ago, and we went to see him. He'd had cancer prior to me meeting my partner at the time, and he'd gone through the chemo and radiation, but he'd maxed out, and he was in remission for quite some time, and then it came back again, and the doctors said, look, unfortunately there's nothing that we can do for you. And it was really a case of, it's interesting because I'll sidestep for a moment, because he was actually given a prognosis of 3 months, and he told us that he had 6 months to sort
Mm,
of stretch it out a bit so it wasn't such a shock. And funnily enough, he went the full 6 months, because that's what he claimed, which is interesting. That's what he
right.
decided
He
essentially.
set
And I
that
think
in his mind. Hmm.
he set that in his mind, which is, there's so many things that we could go into there. But what I want to touch on is the fact that there was one weekend where he asked me to make him some soup. He had tongue and throat cancer. So as the tumor was growing and growing and growing, he wasn't able to eat food. He could only it went from solids to mush to liquid. And he asked me to make him some soup. And it was just so lucky that we went to drop it off on this particular night, because we went inside. My partner had keys. We went inside, and he just kind of yelled out that he was in the shower. And then we heard this almighty thump, and he'd had a fall in there. So lucky we were
Mm,
there. Anyway, got him off to hospital. And because he had cancer, they put him in the oncology ward. And walking through that hospital, the only options throughout the whole hospital in vending machines were diet
mm,
drinks, so full of aspartame, full of all this shit, right? The
mm-hmm,
food that they got in the oncology ward, like they're serving ice cream, they're serving jello, they're serving white bread, they're serving margarine, they're serving it's not even real fruit, it's a fruit cup, for fuck's sake. And I
mm-hmm,
get so passionate about this because in Australia, there's a very big difference between dietetics and, nutritionists,
mm-hmm,
dietitians and nutritionists, because dietitians will literally say, oh, this is what they can be eating, this is what they should be eating, based on these very old school, the pyramids and stuff like that, that,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
what you can eat, which we know now has a detrimental effect on the body for some people. It causes inflammation, it causes, cells to, to continue to grow, and all of that. And so, it just made me so furious that they're literally got people in hospital treating them for cancer, yet they are giving them food that feeds cancer. We know that the sugars in these food feed cancer. And it just made me so angry. Not to mention, like, there was a vending machine there where, and it looked as old as the hills, but you could get like a hot instant meal from it. Like it was kind of
mm-hmm.
like it had a microwave inside. It was like a microwave meal inside a vending machine. Like, that's not even food. It's not even real. There is no
Right.
nutritional value to this. And the thing about chemotherapy and, radiation, you hit the nail on the head, is that it's going to take anything in its sight. My mum had leukemia 20 years ago, and they basically said, if the cancer doesn't kill you, the treatment will. The chemotherapy and the radiation is very likely that that's what's going to kill you, because you are just blasted back to nothing. And, there was no support. They didn't sit down and be like, hey, let's take a look at what it is that you're eating. Tell us what your water is like. What do you like? How much sunlight do you get? How much peace do you have in your life compared to how much stress you have in your life? What are
Right.
some of the, environmental factors that you're exposed to where you live? None of that is taken into consideration in mainstream medical. And I think there is such a gap for it at the moment. But, if we want to sort of go on the controversial end, is that if people are healing themselves with other methods, then there's no money in it, in the pharmaceutical realm. And I get
Yeah.
very passionate about that particular topic, which we don't have to dive into today.
No,
But it's
the
just
only,
interesting to know, what is served, in hospitals, especially in the public system here. Um, and to the point where some places say, no, you can't have food brought in for you because we don't know if it, like, say for example, someone brings in a hot meal and it's left out, doesn't get refrigerated properly, and then they get food poisoning because of that, then they can sue the hospital for it. So there's like a blanket rule that people can't bring you in food. It's fucked.
no, it sounds very similar to the system here.
Mm,
Doctors, when they are training, they get their degree. You think you have to train to be a doctor for what, 7, 8 years or more.
mm,
Um, Not required to take nutrition.
no,
It's not a focus. Food can be medicine, but
mm,
food can also be poison. There's
absolutely.
so much in our modern diets that is just detrimental. Um, it, it's that's a whole other podcast, right? That's a whole
Yes.
other episode. But that is what my father talks about a lot too, and what he did to target things that he wanted to write, not just his mind with omega 3s and other things, but other parts of his body where he was struggling or didn't feel well. He used primarily juicing to help him
Mm.
get all of those healthful things in because he wasn't used to eating all of those things. And it's a lot of work, to get everything in sometimes,
Did he
especially if you're
follow the
not used
Gerson
to it.
therapy protocol?
Which is that?
The
Sorry?
Gerson therapy protocol, which is juicing. A lot of cancer patients do go down the path of
Mm.
Gerson therapy, which is, juicing literally all day, every day. It's a full protocol. Have you heard of that?
No, I'm not sure that that's exactly what he did. He kind of created his own protocol, but it was primarily juicing to get in all of the healthful things that he wanted to target specific things, and to help him to take the supplements that he wanted to take. That's fascinating, though. You should send me information on that, and I'll link it up into my website. Um, but yes, and he was using a number of books to help him in what he wanted to intake and what he wanted to
Mm.
target. There was a book called uh, I will look it up, but it's listed at the back of my book and on our website for free, hopeforthehopeless.com/resources, where he was using these books to help him um, on his nutrition and juicing journey, because that's how he primarily got a lot of the nutrition in. We didn't have a lot of time to cook. My mom was working crazy hours to support the family, 3 kids. You know, those are all considerations as well. A lot of times we turn to the crap, we turn to the highly processed sugars and the fast food and the convenient crap because our lives are so busy in the way that they are now. Right. So, a few other things that I highly recommend anyone read about the power of nutrition to give you that energy, to give you that life, to give you that healing, to take the most advantage of what is on our God-given, earth, for healing and health in general. Um, there's Chris Beat Cancer, a comprehensive plan for healing naturally by Chris Wark. He is amazing. Also, Chris Wark, he's everywhere on social media. I recommend you guys follow him. He's also a cancer nutrition coach. He's wonderful. Embrace, Release, Heal, an empowering guide to talking about, thinking about, and treating cancer by Leah Forston. Radical Remission and Radical Hope by Dr. Kelly Turner, who talks about all of the commonalities that extreme survivors have, that extreme cancer survivors have, which is taking control of your own health, having a deep faith, doing the nutrition and supplements, like everything that my father did, releasing negative emotions. These are things that all super survivors and all people who supposedly have had a miracle survival have in commonality. Um, How Not to Die, Discovering Food Scientifically Proven to Prevent and Reverse Disease by Dr. Michael Greger. He's another amazing resource. Beating Cancer with Nutrition by Patrick Killen. A Holistic Protocol for the Immune System by Dr. Scott Greger. And the book that my father used a lot was, it's called Raw Vegetable Juices by N.W. Walker. And that's what he relied on the most when it came to nutrition, to juicing, and targeting the areas that he wanted to help his body heal.
Beautiful. And we'll link to all of those things in the show notes, and obviously your resources page, because it sounds like you've got some incredible resources on your website. It really sounds like as well, like, yes, all of these things, like especially, nutrition, certain foods, juicing and stuff, absolutely has an effect on the body. The work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's written a book that says You Are the Placebo. And, when we can truly believe something is going to work for us, and when we wholeheartedly believe it, when we embody that belief and we have faith that that is what's going to be the thing that works for us or is going to support us, that can literally change our whole entire lives, and this brings me back to, like, everything in life is an illusion. Everything in life truly is an illusion because we've been told it's a certain way. We've been told this. Like, if someone tells me they've been, diagnosed with cancer, I'm so conditioned to believe, like, oh my God, they're going to die. Because my experience of people having cancer is generally that they're going to die at some point. And so we have this mindset around people that, that experience cancer. And it's funny because I've interviewed someone and she never called herself a cancer survivor. She had cancer. She calls herself a cancer dancer. She says, I'm not a survivor. I'm not a warrior. I didn't fight it. I refused to fight it. I chose to dance with it. I chose to learn from it. I chose to make it my friend. And so her perception of it changed her reality. And so if someone comes along and said, it's the shark cartilage, this is what's going to heal you, right? Yes, absolutely. 100% the shark cartilage will have a physiological response in your body when you take the supplement. But it also, like, imagine it was a sugar pill and you wholeheartedly believed that this was going to have an effect on you. It's because your mind has decided what the outcome of it is going to be. If you think it's not going to work, then you're right. I mean, it's the old saying, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. It comes back down to what you truly believe. And people find faith through their beliefs. It leads them to God. It really leads them to spirituality. It leads them to something if they choose it to be. They might believe in being in, like, traveling to certain places in the world that are going to heal them. There is so much belief around traveling, say for example to Lourdes in France. There's certain places in Italy, and there's certain, like, Glastonbury is a very spiritual place. There's a certain belief system that says, if I go here, I'm going to be healed. And because there is a collective consciousness that is in that area that says this is what's going to heal you, and we take that as a belief, it could be a placebo, but at the end of the day, everything could be a placebo as well. And
That's
it
right.
sounds like,
That's
what
right.
your father experienced, like, there's so many things that actually supported his physical body and his mind, and who knows what effect, the placebo effect had on him.
Absolutely, because and I mentioned that as well because yes, he believed in the shark cartilage. He believed that God was going to heal him. He was taking this, he was taking that belief and manifesting it. He was
Mm,
making it happen. And whether he was tapping into this energy of the universe, the energy of nature, and of the foods, he had to consciously do that in order
mm,
for it to work for him, right? In order
yep.
for it to affect change. And that's, I think, what is so interesting and remarkable, um, and serendipitous about our consciousness. What is it? That is Is that the spark of God that we all have within ourselves? Is that our connection to all of the universe and all of the energy around us? I think it's a little bit of everything, honestly. I think our
And it's
consciousness
what you
is
decided
us.
to be. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, 100%. It's what you decide it to be. And I did a podcast episode very early on, that it's what is spirituality. You know, if you haven't listened to it, go and listen to it. But basically, like it's whatever you decide it to be.
Hmm.
Whatever you decide God to be is your, sovereign birthright to decide that for yourself. You get to decide, consciousness. For me, expanding in my consciousness, I don't go outwards, it's me going further inwards.
Hmm.
The version of me that feels like it's ascending through consciousness, I'm not actually rising, I'm not creating separation, I'm not, going above anything, I'm going deeper within myself. It's a deeper level of understanding within me, and that is my version, and my God, it works for me. Like, it
Hmm.
works beautifully for me. It aligns with everything that I'm desiring in my life, everything I'm creating. That is my faith. It is what, holds me accountable to myself. It's what keeps me going. It's what's providing for me. And I'm having fun with it at the same time. It is serving a purpose for me. And if
Hmm.
someone has a different belief system to me, then I wholeheartedly respect that, because in my view of the world, I'm right. And
Hmm.
in someone else's view of the world, different to my view, they are still right. And that is our birthright, to have that belief system.
And that's why I want to empower people to know, to educate people, to let them know that they have that power and they have that ability
Mm,
to take the reins, right? And to be the head of their own team. I said, if you're facing a health crisis, you taking charge and being the head of the team and bringing in all of these positive, energetic people that are going to help you on your healing journey, super important. But just in general, and just in life, we're taught so many limits, so many boxes that we must be in, and what life is and what reality is. But if you start breaking those things down, they're they're not real limits. Someone had said that really connected with me was that a lot of religions talk about what you can't do when they should be focusing on what you can do through that faith,
mm,
through that energy, through God, and your connection to Him, or you know, through yourself. It shouldn't be about what you can't do and what you shouldn't do. It should be about what you can do, what you have the power to create around yourself. So it's about finding that power within yourself, believing in it, surrounding yourself with positive, energetic, educated people who are going to help lead you on that journey. Because I don't feel like anyone can do this all alone, an island alone. Especially if you're you're fighting a terrible diagnosis or something like that. But here's another radical idea. It's when you have cancer and when you are sick, a lot of people are like, I gotta fight, like I'm fighting this disease and I'm fighting my body. But your body created this disease. People who approach it more as loving your body and getting, like you said, going deeper within yourself and understanding yourself and all of the parts that are you, mind, body, and soul, physical and metaphysical, and filling that with love, filling that with
mm,
purpose, filling that with conviction, and not looking at it so much as I must destroy, but I must elevate, right? And you were
mm,
talking about vibrations, elevating yourself vibrationally, elevating your body, and focusing on those things. Those are all very powerful as well, and you have the ability to do that, but no one educates you on that, right? Nobody tells you that you have that power because most everything about our lives, our society is what is and what you can and can't do, and mostly it's about what you can't do. And what separates us from other people, what separates us from animals, what separates us from the plants and in nature, and when in reality, there isn't really a separation.
Yeah, exactly. It's all oneness, isn't it?
Yeah. And and as you come to terms with that and explore that in your mind and you fill yourself up with that love and connectivity, it helps, it helps on
Mhm.
that journey. Yeah.
Oh, it's been so amazing to talk with you, Jamie. And thank you so much for bringing, your father's wisdom and teaching and experiences to life through this book. I'm really honoring you for the journey that you've been on. Obviously, supporting him, going through his transition and journey out of this life and into the next. And, bringing forward the work here that has just such a beautiful ripple effect. How can our listeners get a hold of your book? Is it purely digital? Is it a physical copy? How can we
hmm
find it all over the world?
Sure. So the book is called Hope for the Hopeless: How One Man Fought the World's Deadliest Brain Tumor on His Terms and Won. It's available on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, and right now you can actually get it on Target.com, Walmart.com. So there are a few global retailers, online retailers, where you can get it. There's also digital copies available for purchase. You can find all of the ways to buy the book, share the book, and my free cancer resource and recommended reading on my website, hopeforthehopelessbook.com. I'm also on Instagram. I have a Facebook group. So I love connecting with people all over the world. And if you send me a message, I will respond. To the best of my ability, juggling two little kids, but I will respond. And I just want people to know there is hope for the hopeless. Um, you are powerful. Become your own best self advocate. You are your own best self advocate. You have so much power. You have so much strength. And if you don't already love yourself, I love you. If that helps you to start loving yourself, you can do it. I am praying for everyone who is facing a dire diagnosis or a traumatic journey or a disease journey of healing. I just want to be there for them, let them know that this story and these resources exist and are here. But ultimately, everyone makes their own journey, right? And we're here in this life to learn and to love. And I wish everyone the best of luck on that journey.
You have been incredible to chat with. Thank you so much, Jamie. And again, we will link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlightened podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlightened and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.